Okay. Perfect. We're recording now. All right, guys, I'm going to kick off now because we have some housekeeping to go through before we even get down. But welcome to our May Adobe Marketo Engage Champion Office Hours. We have 4 incredible champions on to answer all of your questions today, some things that you guys have asked online. And if you're just joining, I mentioned a minute ago, please use the chat button, continue to ask any questions you have that pop up during this. If we don't get to your questions, just know that we have had a lot come through. We always do when it comes to office hours. We try to get through as many as we can. So I'll keep this housekeeping part short and sweet. But if we don't get to your question, just know that we have it recorded, and hopefully we'll make some content or ask it in another office hours. So continue to attend these. We love engaging with you guys this way. So yeah, we'll dive into housekeeping now. Next slide. Yep, thank you. So we have some just user rules for our user groups. If you guys have been to any user groups, you'll know these. No self-promotion or pitching. This is just for us to share ideas. And so don't contact anybody who's on here sharing their ideas without any kind of permission or consent before. And if anybody shares information here, make sure not to share that outside of this. So we just want to keep everything safe and a safe place to share ideas amongst us all. Next one. And then we are recording this, so you guys know you'll be able to watch this back. It'll show up on our mug page. Because this is being recorded, if you don't want to be part of the recording, you can leave, or if you have any questions at all, and watch this back and reach out to us to ask us any questions then. But if you do have any questions, you can email advocacy@adobe.com for how the recording is used. And then you guys should all be members of our chapter by registering for this office hours, but if you're not, make sure that you join. And then there's also many other chapters, some local, some virtual, that you can join as well. So stay connected with all the user groups that are available, but definitely with this one, and we'll let you know when the next ones are coming up. Speaking of the next one, we have one on the 13th of June where we'll have champs join again and discuss best practices, share their tips. And like I said, it's a live Q&A, so ask all your questions. And that's live now, so you can RSVP for it. And then there's other opportunities for within mugs and for people using Marketo users. There's a webinar recording. So here we have a QR code for you that you can watch this back. It's really, really good, especially if you're diving into API work and working with Marketo's API. This is going to be a really key webinar for you to watch. So you can go there to get that recording. It's available on demand now for you. And then there's also, like I mentioned, multiple user groups for you guys to be involved in. So here's some of the local ones in the States. And then on the next slide as well, we have some international ones for you. And I wanted to mention that we actually do have, along with these office hours, we do a regular deep dive where we really dive into a subject. And sorry, I'm now going backwards, but it was on that first page when it says the US, yeah, the North America ones. Down at the bottom is the next Adobe deep dive as well. So you'll want to get plugged in for that one. And then last but not least, I'm going to introduce you guys to our champs that we have, our panelists. We have, I'll be your moderator. I'm Courtney Edwards-Jones. I'm a 2-time champ and have been working with Marketo for 6+ years now, and am a master architect. And yeah, I just love diving into anything marketing operations, marketing automation, the strategic side of things, and working with different integrations and APIs. That's a bit about me, but Sarah, take it away.
Hey everyone, I am the Senior Director of Marketing Technology and Operations at Pluralsight. It's a mouthful, but basically what that means is that I run our marketing ops teams outside of our web side of things. So I've been a Marketo user for about 10 years, I think, at this point. Been everything from a team of 1 to now running a team of 8 at Pluralsight. So, you know, just love to dig into everyone's use case and know like how your particular situation in your company kind of influences how you use Marketo. So thanks.
Perfect. Jimmy?
Jimmy, you might be on mute.
We
can't
hear you. Uh-oh, are you not on mute?
It looked like a great introduction, though.
Don't worry, let's go on. Chris, can you take it over and we'll try and figure out if we can troubleshoot Jimmy?
Sounds good. My name is Chris Kelley. I am a senior consultant at BlastX Consulting. Essentially, I handle pretty much all the marketing or MarTech, engineering, and all that piece. I've been working inside of Marketo specifically for about 5+ years now. I am also a master architect, first year champ, loving it completely. Love diving into the super technical and edge cases, that type of stuff. But in general, answer any questions, that type of thing.
Oh, perfect. And Britney?
There we go. Can you hear me?
We gotcha. Yep.
Oh, okay. I'm Britney Young. I'm actually a director of digital marketing at Prudential. There's a little typo with my title, but I've been in Marketo for 7 years now, I think 7, 8 years. And most recently, my role is at Prudential is focused on our digital strategy for our advisors. And I just love being a part of the business and being able to really use Marketo for all of our customer journeys.
Oh, amazing. Sorry about that typo. I'm so sorry. All right, Jimmy, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Perfect.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. My headset has this funny little mute feature that won't unmute unless I unplug it and plug it back in. So, just like with all great technical challenges, just try to restart it, right? Yeah, I'm a 2-time champ. I've been with Verizon for 4 years now as a principal engineer for their marketing automation platform. So I do a lot of work in Marketo. I do work in AEP and other sort of connected systems that move data throughout the organization. So I've got a pretty wide swath of experience there. I've worked for software organizations, nonprofits, financial institutions, Verizon, obviously. So I have a pretty varied background. Like some of my contemporaries here, I've been a team of one. I've managed teams. I've, been part of large organizations. So, I really like to see the nuance in implementations and sort of how you can make these systems work for your business. And hopefully in the sessions today, we can contribute some information in that vein.
Perfect. All right, guys, let's dive in then. Like I said, we have so many questions to get through. We've kind of started to group them together. So we're going to start off with some general best practices, just things to remind you if you're already doing them, what's kind of a good way to do them, what are ways that we like to do things. Or if you're just now starting out, these will be great ways to start implementing, great things to start implementing in your instance. So Britney, I was actually going to start with you, and I was going to ask you how best you optimize marketing with forms. Forms are always, there's tons of questions around them.
I am like a forms nerd. I will just say that. I think one of the best ways to optimize forms is having branching logic, like especially for marketing and wanting to streamline where the data in that form is getting routed to. That's one thing I'm very like picky about on my forms. And also like have an open text box. And I know that could be like a blessing and a curse, but I always encourage people to have at least one open text box on their form because you actually gain a lot of insight from people filling it out. And I know that was one way I optimized a generic contact us form we had at one company. And it started off where people could literally put anything they wanted in the form. I added the branching logic in the back end. And then from the open text box, I was able to identify other like use cases of audiences that we weren't necessarily addressing with our branching logic. So that would definitely be my tips for optimizing that.
That's great. And then continuing down with some best practices, is there a way to track leads from a campaign without using UTM codes? And Jimmy, I'm going to hand this one over to you.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. So it really depends on the context of what you're talking about. So if you're using sort of an omni-channel approach, depending on the systems that you use, you may use different identifiers that extend beyond typical UTM parameters. So it's a little bit of a sort of yes, but answer to that question. Like, yes, you can definitely track records from your campaigns without UTM parameters, but it's going to be a little more of an indirect path in a lot of cases, and you're going to have to do some stitching between platforms, right? So if you're using some type of CDP or something else that's capturing that information, it's a little bit easier because you have sort of a centralized repository, and you kind of have a place where all of these different elements, like your socials and your display and all that, can sort of meet in the middle there, and you can do your tracking that way. There are other sort of query string parameters that people use. It's probably good to sort of dispel the misnomer about UTM parameters. A lot of folks think of them very statically, right? Like you sort of have these, I can't remember like the original standard UTM parameters. I think there was about 5 or 6 of them, right? You had like term and source and medium and so on, right? You can actually put practically anything that you want within the query string and use that for your tracking purposes. So going outside of UTMs, you can still use that query string to kind of get really creative with how you're tracking things throughout the system, right? I would say the most obvious use case, though, is when you're meeting in the middle for those other channels, like if it's socials or if it's display, direct mail, whatever, wherever you're gathering that data is where you can sort of perform that joining and track where people are, either journey data, from Marketo or Salesforce or what have you, but you can sort of marry it all in the middle and get that campaign performance that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point when you're talking about how you can add anything into the query string. People can get creative to what their business needs are. And I think sometimes when you're just starting to use UTMs, you kind of think it's narrowed down to those 5, like you mentioned, that we all know and have been there around, but it doesn't have to be. So I really like that. We did get a really great question about forms, and we did get that one. I just wanted to call out that we did get that one. I probably should have paired those together when I was asking them. That one came in as well. So I'm going to come back to you. Before I come back to that, which is moving to global forms, before I come back to that one, I just kind of want to get through some of these best practices, real tips and tricks that we have here real quick. So Sarah, I'm going to come to you next and ask your tips and tricks for maintaining demographic scoring.
Yeah, so demographic scoring is great. I've also seen it. I've had some nightmares with it as well if it's not implemented correctly. So, I would always recommend that, you have demographic scoring be, if you have a standard like behavioral demographic scoring model as well, just to start there. If you have the demographic scoring, make that part of your initial processing when you have new leads come in. Make sure you have all the data that feeds into the demographic score before you assess that, so that you can make sure that it's as accurate as possible for all new leads. But then in terms of maintaining it, my first implementation of the scoring model, I made the mistake of just continuing to update the score when someone's title changed, for example. So congratulations, you went from director to VP. Unfortunately, instead of having the 4 points for being a VP instead of the 3 points for being a director, now you have 7 points. because we just added on top of it, right? So I think making sure that when you're adjusting the demographic score, that you are reevaluating the score holistically, or at least for that particular data point, and not just adding on top of it. You can, keep an eye on this as well. If you, monitor what people's scores are, you'll see pretty quickly when you have demographic scores that are above the norm as well. That's a good way to kind of see that type of behavior. But also, make sure they're, especially outside of initial processing, I think, make sure that they are batch campaigns. You don't need to, to trigger off of them. And especially when you have some of this data updated, there will usually be like a title or some other like additional information that's like more than one demographic attribute updated at one time. So you don't want to make my second implementation mistake where you have the, you've learned to reevaluate the whole thing, but then you reevaluate multiple times within one session. And so you're just kind of clearing it, and your BDRs are looking at sales insights and they are saying, what the hell is going on with this scoring? Like, why is it like 0 + 3, 0 + 3, and just goes over a number of times in one day. So, learn from my past mistakes, definitely keep them batches, and that'll also reduce the stress on your Marketo instance too.
No, I love that, Sarah. That's definitely great insight, because that's definitely something I got burned by as well. It's just the constant updating and never holistically readjusting. To that end, one highly, for ease of use, so you don't go crazy because of just a random number somewhere that you forgot to update. If you can, I would suggest trying to make any of those edits based off of a value, a my variable. So you can just go to that top level, change it in one spot, and then wherever that is being used, anywhere within your scoring, demographic or not, you only have to change it in that one location, and everywhere it's being used will be updated correctly.
100%. Yeah. Always use tokens, always centralize scoring. Don't have scoring in like every individual campaign they're coming in from or anything. Yeah. Great add-on, Chris.
I think I'm like I will never ever stop sharing about how much I think people should tokenize where they can. It just makes it so much easier, and definitely, like you said, having centralized scoring versus it pulling in from everywhere when you want to make updates. We had a question come in the chat that's around scoring, so it's a great time to do it, which is what I was saying before with forms. I should have pulled that right in, but we will get to that global form question, don't worry. But following on from this, when someone MQLs, do you zero out the person's score, or do you set it back to what their demographic score is, and what's best practice, or does it depend?
I mean, I would always say it depends.
Yeah, I would say it depends too, for sure.
Yeah. I personally don't zero out their score. I think, when they MQL, you do also want to make sure that they actually like meet that MQL threshold. Some of it depends on, we'll have different types of behavioral activities that will, eventually get to that MQL threshold. Let's pretend like we're all using 100 as that threshold. But then there are also some like contact sales activities. Make sure that those are like either equaling 100 or, at least adding up to 100 there. But I generally wait until after they have been dispositioned by the sales team to adjust their score.
Yeah, I generally like to run decay models to bring that score down, sort of, I guess you could say, organically. But what I'll do is I will sort of throttle their pathway, whatever that may be, into CRM, so that they're not sort of either re-triggering whatever internal process sales has to sort of notify them that you have this lead, or depending on your setup, just completely exclude them from that process for X amount of time. I like that just because you don't start somebody all the way back from zero, right? I mean, just because just because somebody doesn't make it all the way through the sales process, that that happens for myriad reasons, right? And if you, especially if you have like a very compact sales cycle, you don't want to sort of make them jump through all of the hoops all over again. If say in a month or 2 months, they could be really a genuine prospect again and right back with sales and maybe closing a deal there. So that's the approach I take, but it's different for everybody, and you really have to really, just like with everything having to do with scores, you really need to partner with sales, right, to see what makes sense there, because it's different for every business and every team.
Yeah, to build on that, the reason I'm wary about zeroing out scores is because it removes information, and it doesn't matter how that information is brought in or what have you. Just having that information really lets you dig into everything about the process. So, for example, one of my clients, they had their whole scoring set up and getting information across, but there was a particular sticking point and they couldn't figure out what was going on. But being able to, being able to follow along and see where the scoring was happening, we were able to understand that their process was not set up as they expected, or they didn't think of a certain edge case. And if we were to zero out all that information, we would lose the valuable data that we used in order to figure out why are most of our leads not making it into sales when they should be, right? All the demographic information, all the interaction should say that this person is a legit lead. Why isn't it happening? So in general of getting rid of information or zeroing out, I tend to avoid that if I can. But like everybody else said, it really depends.
No, that's really good. We have this is a lively conversation around scoring in the chat as well. So I just want to ask a couple more questions, and then we'll jump back into some of the questions that were sent in when you guys all registered. But and there's a lot of information on scoring online as well, and we can put up some resources following this around that, so that once we release this video, we can get more resources in there for you guys. But one thing I did want to touch on is because somebody asked a couple good questions about RCM, and not everybody will have used that. So I wondered if anybody wanted to jump in with information on the core stages that they would set up in RCM for a B2B model, and then maybe what KPIs you're tracking at those stages as well. Or not, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. What we can do is, so I'm in the middle of actually building out a new life cycle for us at the moment, and diving into what our stages are and our life cycle stages and everything. So I'll pull some stuff together on that, like I said, and when we publish the video of this, we can add some information in there for you to go and read. But diving back into the questions, Chris, I'm coming to you for the next one. We got several questions all around on deduplication. Now, Marketo obviously dedupes where it can, but it isn't always perfect, as we know. So how can you detect when a duplicate's been created, and what can you do in place to set good standards to be able to dedupe with that, and how you do that within Smart Campaigns, or do you use the CRM, or how do you do that?
Yeah, a lot of really great questions about this one. And I know it's a really common issue. So first off, I would like to say that there is so much information online about this that you can really dig into to try and find something that will really fit your specific industry or your specific needs. And another thing, there's some information coming out for in-product, just by trying to bring a lot of these questions to the forefront, right? So everybody can try and get some of those best practices. But in general, how do you detect? Actually, Marketo has a system smart list that will automatically search your database for an email. And the reason it does email is because that is by default Marketo's unique identifier. And it will essentially say, if you share the same email, you are a duplicate person. So obviously that will depend on your specific instance. If your instance has, for whatever reason, a requirement for duplicate emails, you might need to try and set up something, a specific or a custom variable as a different unique identifier. So there's a lot of documentation or communication about that. But to answer that specific question, inside of the database table, if you go in your system smart lists, there is a possible duplicate smart list. So that's how you can detect them. The other pieces that you can do is create your own smart list. So look for information that you know should be unique, and you can say there's a specific filter that you can say possible duplicate, and then you can choose that variable that you would like to use, and then that field that you would like to use, and then be able to check for your specific instance if that is a duplicate. Handling duplicates. There are so many ways that you can go about it, because Marketo is just that nice to you, right? Give you all the bullets and allow you to shoot you in the foot if you're so inclined. But there are a lot of different ways going about it. So it really depends how technical you are, what resources you have available, if you need to stay specifically in Marketo, or if you're able to utilize something like an iPass tool or CRM, or if you are able to create your own API. That would be the gold standard for trying to eliminate as many duplicates as possible, is having an API set all the information into Marketo, as you are able to choose specifically how data enters and on what parameters data comes in. This is a very technical, meaty subject, so I'm trying to keep it higher level. But there's a couple of different options. So you can do it manually. So the same place where you found the duplicates in the first place, you can actually go in and start manually mushing them together, right? You can choose, I want this to be the master record. I like all of this information, and then take some of the updates from the other possible duplicates. So if you are someone who needs real specific information, and all of this information is really important, and you want to be really careful about how you merge, going in and doing it manually is the most time intensive, but it's also the way that you can for 100% sure know that it's merging the way that you want it. There are more automated ways. For one, you can actually pay Marketo to have a service where Marketo will come and do it for you. You can set up how you want those leads to win, who's going to win what and for what reason, things like that. You can start building out your own. Okay, so this is when you really need to be customized and you like being in there. It's not a black box, so you can understand exactly why your data is doing exactly what it's doing. So you can do that using an iPass tool. So it's going to be more WYSIWYG. It's going to be less in code. It's going to be more user-friendly. It's not always the most customizable for what you're trying to do. That depends on the service that you choose. But CRMs are also a great way to do it. One thing I would like to say, having implemented quite a few instances, is Marketo always treats the native integration with your CRM as the system of truth. So let's say you're moving from some sort of legacy map, HubSpot, and you're trying to make sure you don't lose any of that information. Wait, don't bring that information in until you have done your CRM integration first, and then bring in the information from your legacy, because Marketo is just going to accept. So if you have an entire list of 100,000 people from your legacy instance, and then you bring in your CRM, your Salesforce, what have you, it's just going to accept. It's not going to check automatically to see if the information is there. I've had many clients had this issue before. It's not fun. So make sure you're doing things in order. But that's actually the majority of where you're going to see your duplicates, is from people processes, or coming in from your CRM. So for example, if your sales team enters that new prospect, that new lead manually and they don't check to make sure that Chris Kelley already exists inside of the CRM, it doesn't matter. It's going to be brought in anyway, and it's going to create that duplicate because the CRM always wins. So I can go on and on and on about this, as you could possibly tell, but I'm going to give the floor back. But there's so much meat to this question that I'm happy to have any conversation about it. I'm sure the rest of the champs have their own experiences, horror stories, what have you, their own tips and tricks. But I'll release the floor back to the group.
No, that's great. I'll pause there to see if anybody wanted to dive in. But on this, in this thread of anyways, having duplicates, having clean data, the best ways to do that, I think it's a good time to talk about how do we keep our database clean. Britney, do you have any tips and tricks for us on that?
Yeah, I'm actually glad like Chris talked a lot about the duplicate thing, because I didn't know if that was part of that question, because I was going to say that's its own beast. But for other things on keeping your database clean, I like to, at a past company, I had to clean up a few instances and at the same time, because I was managing like 4 different ones. So one of the things I did to like just tackle that is create categories for what I wanted to clean. Like, was it bad email addresses? Was it really old data, like, you know, people that haven't engaged in a certain amount of time? Was it even data that was just like missing? You know, being able to see where was I missing a lot of job titles, company names, things like that. So I created all of those categories and then created smart lists to really analyze and be able to see how many people fall into that category. Then from there, I'm a big fan of using people performance reports with custom columns. So a lot of that's how I really did that analysis. I took the people performance report as like I named it like my database cleanup, and each of those smart lists I referenced as a custom column. And then from there, I like to keep like a cleanup program. And within that program, any of the smart campaigns, smart lists, or static lists that are going to be a part of that cleanup, I like to keep it all in that program, especially if I have to go back and reference anything. But that's really where I would say to get started, is just understanding what are those categories of data that you need to clean up.
I was on mute. That's perfect. One of the categories that I think is always good is to keep track of your unsubscribes as well. Obviously from there, you won't have to be worried about cleaning up to send out your emails and whatnot, but we did have a really good question that came in about migrating data. So again, in this thread of like keeping our data organized and how we're doing that, if you're migrating from a different marketing automation platform into Marketo, Sarah, what are some of the best ways to kind of keep track of those unsubscribes and migrate them over?
Yeah, I think before you migrate them over, I think you need to have a conversation with the business around how you want to handle them if you're going from one system to another, especially if this is part of an acquisition or a merger, for example. You could have people in both databases, right? So, you know, have the conversation. If they are opted into one but not the other, what do we want to happen there? So that you can make sure that, you know, we agree on how to actually handle them. But I would say, like, if you are just moving to a brand new Marketo instance, not already tied to a CRM, I would do that first and make sure that you can get them into Marketo however you want to. Easiest way is usually just a list import. Depending on the size of your database, that may be easier than others, but you know, get your unsubscribes from the other system, import them with unsubscribed equals true, and then they are in Marketo, and then get rid of them. Just delete them. You probably don't need them either in your CRM, or if you want to keep them, again, that's part of the business conversation. You know, do you want to keep them or not? But you know, if you can't email them and they're not active in your CRM, you probably don't need them in Marketo. So I'd say let them free, but also make sure that you're capturing that that unsubscribe information. And even when they're deleted, if that unsubscribe is true, Marketo will keep that durable unsubscribe. So should they come back in through another list import, that data is there. And now Marketo can, you can take advantage of the durable unsubscribe feature in Marketo.
Oh, that's brilliant. So guys, before we kind of turn away from this best practices segment, first of all, thank you. I think we've shared so many tips about several different topics as we've kind of quick fired our way through best practices. I do want to pull it back to the question we got at the beginning, which I really should have just thrown in at the time, but forms again. We did have a question about what to consider before moving to global forms. And then in the chat, somebody just asked as well, like, how do we use the same forms for multiple languages, and just any tips around that? Jimmy, do you have some tips for us?
So for multiple languages, there's a few ways that you can approach that. You can use snippets, you can use individual forms like based on language. You can use personalization within the page itself. So it kind of depends on I know we say that a lot, like it depends, right? But it really does depend on your individual setup that you have as to how you're going to approach that. I think everyone does it a little bit differently, and it just depending on the stack that you have will sort of determine the route that you go. Um, Personally, I think snippets are a great way of approaching that type of personalization because you can essentially use like the same block of text and just have it updated based on whatever segmentation someone belongs to geographically. The in-page personalization is also nice, and it's getting better and better as the tech matures, right? So you're able to do that a little more quickly. There's a little less of the flashing and stuttering effect that you get with in-page personalization these days. Obviously, that's not something that everybody has access to. So that's something to sort of keep in mind if it's something that you guys are considering getting access to, if that's in the cards. That's a method that I personally like, but you can really do it any number of ways. There's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of good documentation within Experience League itself about how you can approach things like language specific personalization.
Perfect. Okay, guys, I'm going to change up our focus for a little bit. I do want to get to, we got a lot of questions around getting more involved with Adobe Marketo Engaged, our certifications that we have, becoming a champion. So I do want to get to that. But before that, I have a question for the whole panel around Robin question. What is the most underused or valued feature in Marketo, and what's a feature you highly recommend and for what? Basically, what's your favorite feature is what I want to know. If you had to pick, we don't have favorites. Anybody can jump in. It's just a free for all to chat.
I think velocity scripting is probably one of the most powerful tools within Marketo. It's rapidly approaching parity with other things that are sort of in the works and that are still new. But in terms of like bang for your buck, so to speak, velocity scripting is really great. And for those who don't know about it, there's a ton of information on scripting throughout the community. So you can do a Google search and sort of find out about it. But just sort of in a nutshell, it's a type of token that allows you to do some really fancy personalization. And not only are you able to personalize based on what's on the person object, but you can also personalize based on anything that you have stored on your custom objects, which makes things, really powerful, right? It's really hard to do that just in a a more standard and basic way. So I think velocity scripting is great. There's sort of a high barrier there because it is relatively technical. You know, the fancier the personalization that you're trying to do in your email content, the more technical gymnastics you're going to have to do within the coding itself. And yes, there is coding involved. It's based on Java, but once you sort of get over that hump, it's really powerful in terms of the types of personalizations and customizations you're able to do. I mean, from languages to limited time offers to you know, cross-sell opportunities. You can basically build all of your emails on the fly if you want to using velocity scripts. So that's the one for me that is sort of like the shining star at the moment.
Yeah, you definitely unlock so much potential in Marketo when you have that. I will say there's a question on how best to learn velocity script. You know, there is, like you said, a lot of information on the community, Stanford Whiteman's blog. I think that's, you know, probably where a lot of us have at least tried to hack together some velocity script, if not actually learn it. If you do want to learn it, there are definitely people who would pay you a lot to come and help them out too. So just, you know, from a career perspective, if you feel inclined to do that, definitely is a good market there for people who really know velocity script and want to make their Marketo email shine. So you know, I'm a token nerd. I think we're all kind of token nerds here, but definitely, you know, heavy usage of tokens. I would say a lot of people are using tokens, nested tokens. Don't forget about nested tokens. There's a lot that you can unlock when you have that structure there as well. But one of my favorite features of Marketo is not actually a feature of Marketo, it's the community, right? That's where there's so much information on there. Like, don't, you know, like the people, but also like all the information that you can get from other people who have been in the same situation. So yeah, definitely don't forget about that part.
100%. I mean, that is one of the best reasons to be a part of Marketo is the community, hands down. One of the best communities I've ever been a part of. But since Sarah and Jimmy took mine, I will go ahead and say that one of the best unused or underutilized, especially when you're getting started, is the product library, the program library, where you can go and download best practice library or best practice programs of every type, preset, ready to go, all of the tokens, all of the content necessary to get you started. And it is really, really a great way to jumpstart your learning, to get going into Marketo, understanding why you need to do this, or I'm missing a step, what is it, and it's killing me. But yeah, that is just a treasure trove of information.
I would say for me, the custom views feature on Smart Lists. I know a lot of we use, like, at least I do, I'm always using Smart Lists to like analyze different sets of data. And so I'm big on having multiple custom views. I'll have one that has like all of my fields I would need for unsubscribe, or all the fields I want to see for like a new lead that's created, things like that. So if you haven't set up custom views before for your Smart List, I think that's an underused one. And I also mentioned before, for just analyzing data, especially if you inherited an instance, people performance report with custom columns, I will say that again, that will really help you at least get a base understanding of what the heck is going on in your instance.
Totally. I would say I'm not a heavy user of the Marketo reports, just because I've always had something external from Marketo, but the people performance reports, just for seeing like what is even happening, that is so important. And also on the custom views, I just want to say, like, I have my custom views. Unfortunately, we cannot share custom views across the instance, like, you know, feature request, but also, you know, when you're onboarding people, I find it really helpful to have to say, like, these are some of the custom views you probably want to set up as well, and just kind of make that part of your onboarding process.
That's perfect. All right, guys, I kind of want to change because we've had some exciting news this week, which is applications for being a champion for the next year are open now. So I wanted to kind of switch views and talk. We got several questions about it as well, but talk about becoming a champion, but also talking about the certifications that can lead up to that. So you do have to have some certifications to apply for a champion, and then there's different ways. So let's start off with certifications. So Britney, can you talk us through any resources or tips and tricks you have for passing the business practitioner expert exam?
Sure. I highly recommend, like Chris mentioned, product docs, because a lot of times there may be like features that you might not use typically at your organization, but the product docs is everything Marketo. So I think it's always good to go over, especially for like core pieces of Marketo, whether it be like smart lists or what goes in a program, all of that. Definitely review that. I also know there's a lot of like there's the site Quizlet has flashcards out there that has been very, very helpful for a lot of those kind of like standard questions or like basic questions you might find on the exam. So those are two things that I know I've used in the past to help me.
Yeah, to add on to that, Brittany, 100% agree. But sometimes if you're lucky or if you reach out to a local mug, you can ask them to try and provide a how do I get ready for the exam sessions, and that's how I learned when I first got started, or just searching like previous mug recordings. They usually do have something out there where you can do a deep dive of the specific sections on getting started. So absolutely agree with you, Brittany, and just getting more involved with the Marketo community around you to possibly study together, right?
That's a great idea. I like that. I especially like that. I did a study group when I was studying to become an architect, which for the record, you don't have to hold the architect certification to apply to be a champ, but you do need to have the business practitioner expert. But before we kind of get more into how to become a champ, on that note of study groups, that was really, really helpful. Chris, do you have any other tips? Because you are also an architect. Any tips, as several of us are, on when you're
exam
exam
of my life. Oh my gosh. So 100% get in and try and break Marketo. So that is my number one recommendation is get in the system. Try and figure out, like, set yourself a ridiculous goal and try to engineer or architect your way to it, because on a very high level, that is what the exam is going to be. It is going to be very non-specific, but it's going to ask you questions along the lines of, if you were to do X, Y, and Z, how would you do it? And then they would say, you would need to first create a smart program, but they won't tell you what it does. Then you would need another smart program. Then you would need a smart campaign with a custom variable. And then they would kind of jumble it all around. So like, you really need to understand the processing of how Marketo will try to do something, but you don't need to like go into the super nitty-gritties of the answer, because that is holistically the type of question, the level of question they're going to be asking for. So if you understand at a really solid level, this is how the data comes into Marketo. This is how a smart list will happen. A smart list will supersede, or it will happen before this process, or you need to make sure that a certain a certain update of information happens before it's processed somewhere else. So there's a lot of I would say talking about Marketo, trying to utilize, like Courtney said, other people who have gone through it or are preparing to go through it, trying to go through that list. That's what I did. Is there's a list of required information to know, and then I would just talk, like brain dump everything with the people around me and say, this is what I think a Marketo program would do because of this. What do you guys think? And then like try to hash it out, because that really expands just the understanding of Marketo. Because think of it in terms of granularity. Your expert is going to be, you need to go to this exact spot inside of Marketo and you need to choose this exact option to get something to happen. And the architect level is a bit more removed, but it's an architect, right? You need to understand your processing limits. You need to understand how to set up and how people are going to come into Marketo, the APIs and things like that. Oh, great. Yeah, Udemy has a Marketo course. That's great. So, I mean, utilize the community is the biggest thing. Talk about it. Ask your mugs to talk about it. For me, getting in and trying to break Marketo is how I got through it. Some of the hardest clients that I had really weird edge cases. Like, why are you trying to do that with Marketo? But okay. I mean, but those are the type of clients that got me through it, because they forced me to go in, read the documentation, understand it to a really unique degree. And that's how I got through it. Talking, studying as a group, getting into the system, the documentation. Seriously, the documentation. I can't stress it enough, Brittany. Thank you. But it's there. The information is there. Don't feel bad about missing it the first time. It's a really hard exam. And just for in general, you can retake it within 24 hours immediately, and then you have a 2-week break that they enforce. So at first you don't succeed, try again. It's really nice to have it because you don't have to pay for it again, and they're free retakes, and you don't have to be on camera for updating your certification, so you have no excuse for staying up to date.
Yes, that is so true.
Box done.
I would just add real quick, when you're saying get in and break it, if you have a sandbox, please break that one first before you break your live instance. But if you don't have a sandbox,
good clarification.
Chris said break it, and I agree. No, that's really good. Anybody else have any tips for any of the certifications? And then
I'll just double down on like studying as a group. I think when you I would definitely divide and conquer. Not only is it less for you to dig into, but make sure when you're doing that, you take the pieces you don't know as well. And that will force you to really solidify that. And then the act of teaching will help you really solidify that knowledge as well. So, share the burden, focus on your weaknesses and not your strengths, because that's what you actually need to focus on. And, just, really have, I've done a study group with my team where we've had really different levels of knowledge across, across the team, and, just helping everyone to kind of come up to speed has been really helpful, and, just also really bonds people as well. Don't underestimate the importance of trauma bonding. So yeah, definitely do it together.
That's so true. So kind of talking about the community, which we started to do, and I wanted to get in these tips and tricks first before we talked about it. Marketo Champion Program 2024-2025. The applications are now open. Brittany, can you talk to us a bit about how to become a Marketo champ? And anybody tips too.
I would definitely say get involved with the community, and always, like, I think sometimes there's this perception that you have to be really smart in Marketo and know all things Marketo. So like when it comes to maybe posting something, you don't know what to post and stuff like that. I always say Marketo's new. It's always going to be new to someone. So even if you're making like a LinkedIn post because you want to, you know, be engaged and show your support for Marketo, and it's something very simple or basic, there's someone that doesn't know that tip or that trick because they're brand new to Marketo. So I would say definitely like get involved, you know, share information that way. And also befriend a champ. I found that helpful, at least for myself. I met Rico from the Dallas Mug, and he's the one who told me all about it. I originally I knew of champs, but I wasn't like going to apply. And he's like, oh my gosh, no, you should totally do it. So definitely befriend a champ. I think that helps as well.
Jimmy was actually the one who got me into the champ. Met him at
yeah.
Summit. Met him at Summit. He told me all about it. And he's like, yeah, get into it. Sounded great.
Yeah, I think I
yeah,
just
and
want to, or no, go ahead, Jimmy.
I was just gonna say, you know, I think it just goes to Brittany's earlier point, like, you know, a lot of folks sort of have this imaginary barrier, and everyone does it, right? Everyone has a certain degree of like imposter syndrome or hesitancy or what have you. But I would say that there are probably a lot more people qualified to be in the champions program than actually ever apply. And if you find yourself engaging with us at this level, right, on a consistent basis, and you're part of the community, you know, you're giving back, you're helping other people, like it does not hurt to take a swing and try. Like the worst possible thing is they say try again next year, and you've lost literally nothing but a little bit of time. And what you've gained along the way is a plethora of contacts and information and learnings that are going to boost your chances for the next time. So I would say, like, if you're on the fence, if you're like, you know, I don't know, take a shot, right? Just take that shot, because if you're here with us and you're learning things and you're helping others, you're right there. So, you know, don't think that it's not for you.
Totally. I would, definitely on the imposter syndrome thing, right? Like I think we were at Summit and all of the first year champs were talking and like, oh yeah, like I just feel so much imposter syndrome. I was like, wait, the person who is making me feel like I don't know what I'm talking about also feels like he doesn't know what he's talking about. And so like we're all there in that same situation. And it's not about, being the smartest or like the best Marketo, like most knowledgeable person. A lot of it is like you're a champion for Marketo. You love it. You want to share. It's, like you love the community. I think there's a large aspect of that. So definitely like getting involved, like everyone said. I love the user groups. Definitely join those. There's no excuse now that they're virtual, and lots of them are on. Lots of the recordings are on YouTube as well. So just get involved as much as you can. Jump into people's LinkedIn comments and DMs and all that as well. Like just become part of the community.
Yeah. I would say the best thing that helped me would be to start sharing on LinkedIn or some other social. Part of the application process is to show proof. What have you done for the community? How have you given back and things like that? So saying that you are a member of a mug, you go to mugs, you speak at these events, speak at Adobe events, Marketo events, sharing your information back on a blog post, your own personal blog, or on LinkedIn, things like that. So being able to show that you are as engaged as you say you are is quite important. You need to have that certification, whatever level it is, and just showing that you truly care about the community and things like that. So if you feel like you've got it, then absolutely. You never know if you get it or not.
No, that's really great. I want to reiterate a couple things that you guys said. That one, if you go for it and you don't get it, please don't be discouraged, because there are so many people that apply. But like Jimmy said, it shows everybody at Adobe how involved you are, and to come back the second year, like it's never it's never looked down upon if you applied and didn't get it one year. To come back to the second year or third year or whatever and say, hey, I really want this, I'm going to go for it again, is really, really great. So don't be discouraged at all if you went for it and you didn't get it. But equally, I would say, or not equally, but also on that to mention how you guys say it's not the smartest in the room. I think having these office hours, as much as I've worked in Marketo and am very lucky to be a champion alongside you guys, I learn something new from these office hours every single time. So with that imposter syndrome or whatever you want to call it, like, we're constantly learning as well. So you don't have to be up there and have the answers to everything. There's things that some of us are great at within Marketo and within marketing automation. And there's things that we're still learning and other people are great at, and they're the strengths that they come. So really, play into that and know that what you're interested in and what value you can add to the community, because it is just a community. We're just here to all learn more and strengthen our skills and share tips and tricks as we learn them, and it's a really great place for that. So just don't be discouraged. And on the point of, before I wrap up, I know we're a bit over time, sorry guys, I'm gonna let you go. But on the point of that, when I was applying for the first time, I just reached out to Champ. So reach out to us. If you have further questions, just find us on LinkedIn, ping us a message with any of those questions, and we'll come back to you. I reached out to some previous champs and just asked a bit more about the program. What does it take once you're in? What does it involve? All that kind of stuff. So there's lots of good information out there. And then we're happy to just provide our insights and what it's meant for us in our careers and everything. So on that note, like I said, we're over time. Thank you guys so much. You guys are all incredible at what you do, and I really appreciate jumping on with the 4 of you guys today and answering a plethora of questions. We had a lot more on the API, so I just want to also draw back people's, at the beginning, I mentioned that webinar on demand. It's all around the REST API, so go watch that if you asked one of those questions we weren't able to get to. There were lots we weren't able to get to, so hopefully we'll see you guys on next month's office hours. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.